Alrighty. Hi there, Allie Nimmons. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the 5 ways that I recommend you can diversify your events, your projects, whatever it is that you're working on and putting out on the web, how you can make those things more diverse. So really quickly, I have been using WordPress since 2014. I've been an active member of the WordPress community for a little over a year. I live in Miami, Florida, and I work at WP Buffs as the community manager there. I identify as female, multiracial, and queer. So I check quite a few of those diversity boxes. And I love to write about and talk about diversity and the WordPress community online in multiple places. To find any of that content, you can start at my Twitter, Allie_Nimmons, or at my website, allienimmons.com. So let's dive in. So before we start, I just want to talk a little tiny bit about what diversity actually means. Diversity is defined as a range of different things or a variety of different things, which is really important because I feel like there are a lot of myths about what diversity is, particularly when it comes to people. And, people might say, well, adding more Black people to your event just makes it more diverse, or adding women to your event or having an event of all women makes it diverse. And that's not entirely true. Diversity is a huge topic for discussion. It's a huge issue, but diversity means diversity in all ways, as many ways as possible. A truly diverse or project is when underrepresented people or people from every single walk of life have a seat at the table together. So an event maybe that is 100% women, that's a fantastic event. There's probably content at that event that is focused on diversity, probably conversations focused on diversity, but that in and of it because it is one type of person. So I just kind of wanted to set that mindset to encourage you to think about diversity in that way, that diversity is not removing people from an environment and replacing them all with one other type of person, but diversity is creating a mixing pot so that we have multiple voices and multiple viewpoints at the table. So let's go into our first tip recommendation for making your project or your event more diverse, and that is to prioritize diversity. Before you can really do anything, you have to decide for yourself, for your team, for whatever structure it is, that diversity is going to be important to you. You can't just say it, you have to do it. You have to let it take center stage. It cannot become a secondary or back burner initiative. It's not enough to just say now that, oh, I'm not a racist, or, oh, I'm not a sexist. You have to actively prioritize actions and decisions that support diversity and acceptance and move it forward. You have to be thinking every point in your processes, how does diversity play into the decisions that I'm making right now? We often worry about prioritizing diversity over other things and maybe not being fair. So for example, if you're looking at getting speakers or guest posters to your blog, something like that, you don't want to say, well, I'm only asking this person to contribute because they're a diverse individual. We have to look at diversity as a value add, a point in someone's favor, basically. The same way that maybe a lot of experience or a certain type of certification or a certain talent is a value add when you are weighing people against each other. You have to give a diverse background, a diverse set of experiences, weight when adding somebody to a team, whether it's in hiring process or just asking someone to be on your podcast. It doesn't stop at hiring or recruiting. How are diverse people being celebrated or embraced within your company, organization, project, whatever the case may be? What policies or guidelines do you have to protect them? What diverse content are you putting out there? What diverse causes and events does your company support? At every facet of your business, when you break your business down into its main chunks, we have to observe how diversity is being honored within each chunk, not just at the beginning when we're bringing people. So the second point is about widening your sphere. It's all about who you know, right? Especially in an industry like ours, your community of people, your sphere of influence is incredibly important. When you're starting a project, like a podcast or something like that, you typically reach out to your friends, right? The people in your sphere, and you ask them to help you. You ask them to participate. People are more likely to help you to participate if they know you. That's just how we are as human beings. But when you have a group of friends that is really all like you and very similar to you, you cut off the ability for you to actually have diverse people to participate. It has to start with you. You have to start widening your sphere of influence in your life, in your timeline, in your feed, in your inbox. All of those things have to grow. And that's where it starts. It really starts with you and how you grow your network of people. You'll find that the wider your sphere of influence is, the less work you actually have to do when you are trying to diversify a group of people that you're building. Calls for participants are easier. Hiring is easier when you already have a diverse people, just on the case of them being diverse, to bring into your sphere. It means looking at somebody and finding the ways that you are similar instead of just looking at the ways that you are different. Finding ways to interact with them based on what you have in common, right? Going back to that kindergarten mindset and how we would make friends as kids. I feel like we forget that a lot when we start moving into business. There are lists, there are Facebook groups all over the place that you can find with a quick Google search that you can join and start widening that sphere of influence, so that you're not just interacting on a daily basis with people who look or think like you or come from a similar background to you. Those are all fantastic opportunities for you to join in, maybe sometimes be quiet and listen, learn, and understand. Which actually leads me to my next point, which is reaching out to established groups. As I said, there are tons of groups out there that are supporting diverse individuals within a given industry. So there are, for us, as applies to us, there are women in tech groups, there are queer in tech groups, there are disabled in tech groups. All of these sorts of groups already exist. And when you can reach out to those groups, become involved, support them, and tap into that network, that means a wider audience for you. It means less work for you when you're working to diversify. That relationship building and building those qualified leads is all extremely valuable. But it does mean for you to take the time and do that research. It means prioritizing diversity like we talked about, not just doing it when you have time, when it's convenient, and we have a few extra minutes, but setting aside time to really do that research. If there is an all-female conference in your industry, but you identify as male, that is a great opportunity for you. You should still be attending those. And if you're looking for things like speakers, guest writers, podcast guests, so on and so forth, it's a great idea to reach out to the heads of those diverse groups, to the leaders, to share your application page within their communities, ask for their inputs on your efforts, and really extend that hand out to them if they are able and willing to provide assistance. That's another thing that we always need to be keeping in mind, that when you reach out to people, it's not really their job to help you. They are not obligated to help you. But if you can basically just extend that bridge and let them come to you, you'll find that you get a lot more people helping you, and that in and of itself actually does go back to widening that sphere of influence. Which leads nicely into my next point, which is finding ambassadors. Part of attaining a more diverse group of individuals, if you yourself don't kind of fit into that subset of a diverse person or fit into that underrepresented group, the key to that is finding people to help you, to admitting that you have a problem, a deficiency, a lack of diversity in the first place, and asking for help. So consider this. Maybe you are a developer and you want to host a JavaScript specific event. But maybe you are not super familiar with JavaScript. Maybe that's not your thing, that's not your bag. You're more of a PHP developer, whatever. This is just an example. But if you were doing this, you would ask JavaScript experts that you know to help you find people to speak and to attend. You would reach out to the people who are already well versed in that area that you are lacking and you would ask for their help, right? It's the same thing with building a more diverse environment. You have to admit that you cannot do it all yourself, that you don't have all the answers. It is not correct to assume that someone is obligated to help you or that they even can help you. Obviously, not all know each other, right? But if you are a white male and you have a woman friend who is African American, most likely that person probably has more Black and more female friends than you do. Acknowledging that deficiency that you're experiencing, and asking if they can help you is really the first step. This should come after you do as much research as you can, right? Not as a first tactic. And we always want to invite of merit, right? We talked about having diversity be a value add. All of the other value adds still need to be there as well. Whenever you breach one of these conversations, it's important to think about how you begin that conversation. And we need to begin by explaining, like I said, that you need help. So saying something like, hi, my event is not as diverse as I'd like it to be, and I can't turn it around all by myself. Are you available to help me? Are you tap into a wider network of people who have X, Y, Z skill? That opens you up to a conversation about how to move forward rather than, is my event too light? Can I talk to some of your friends, or can you connect me to some of your friends? That really doesn't connect properly. And we don't ever want to make someone feel as though, we are doing them a favor by inviting more diverse people into our group. We need them, and you have to be honest with yourself and with them about that. You have to talk the talk, and we have to walk the walk. You cannot just support diversity and if it benefits you, but you have to support it for its own sake. And that means it has to be part of your lifestyle. It has to be part of your thought process. Follow more diverse professionals in your industry. Subscribe to more diverse newsletters and podcasts. Donate to diverse causes. Attend diverse events. Share content by diverse creators. No one is saying to run down to the nearest Black Lives Matter march and, dive headfirst in, although that might not be a bad idea right now. But you can use the platform that you have to uplift other people every single day, no matter what it is you're working on, whether it directly benefits you or not. And the added benefit to that is that it brings more diverse individuals into your sphere of influence. And it helps diverse individuals feel like they can actually come to you because you are creating a safe environment. You're creating a safe saying, I support everybody, right? I'm going out of my way to make sure that I'm supporting everybody. And that says something, whether you really notice it or not. People from underrepresented groups, if they visit your Twitter profile, if they visit your blog and they see you highlighting and uplifting people who look and think like them, they know that you are somebody who, for lack of a better word, understands. So supporting other diverse content is extremely important, especially not particularly about how is this going to help me, how is this going to help my event, how is this going to help my project, but in the long run, it does. And a bonus tip, I know I said 5, but this is 6. Remember that you are not looking for women. You are not looking for people of color. You are looking for people who have a new and different and unique experience to you. Think of the last time you had a problem that you were just completely stumped on and completely stuck on. And maybe you showed it to somebody else and said, I need a fresh pair of eyes. I need somebody to come at this. I've been looking at this too long. I can't see the forest for the trees. And they were able to see something that you couldn't. That's what diversity is, getting another set of eyes, a unique set of eyes to find opportunities, to find problems, to offer something that you can't. Prioritizing diversity means that you are acknowledging a wider problem, right? An industry-wide problem, a national problem, a global, that there are underrepresented groups of people. That in and of itself, the fact that we have a name for that is a problem. Those people need an extra hand to reach out to them, just as much as you need them involved in your projects, because there are fewer of them as it is. But what you actually what you want from them, right? What you value from them is what they intend to bring to the table in the diversity that they have. You're prioritizing diversity, but you're striving to make your event and your space more diverse at the same time. And that means that you're making your event better by attempting to solve this problem. So those are my 5 tips. I actually kind of completed that a little bit more quickly than I thought I would. But I hope that there was something in what also I should say, if you think of a question later, or if you're watching this on a replay or something like that, feel free to tweet me with questions at Allie_Nimmons on Twitter, or send me a DM. I love having conversations about this sort of stuff, even if it's a little uncomfortable or a little awkward. Yeah, I love having these sorts of conversations. So feel free at any point to reach out to me.
All right. So we have a question that's popped in from an attendee that asks, when reaching out to a potential ambassador, how do you avoid making that person feel like they're being tokenized?
It's a really good question. Tokenization is extremely easy to fall into, and it's very, very awkward. I think it really does start with identifying that this is a problem that you're having. Tokenization also often comes in at, the feeling of being thrown a bone, or the feeling of, being included just for diversity's sake, and not because you as a person have anything of value to offer. So starting with, explaining the deficiency that you're experiencing, explaining why you think this person would be a good choice to help you outside of the fact that they tick a box. So for example, to say like, hey, I'm having a problem. I only have white dudes on my panel. I've seen that you're really active in lots of different sorts of communities, and that you are really great at making connections with people. I was wondering if you are available to help me. So starting with the deficiency, identifying a skill or a strength that they have outside of being an underrepresented person, and also really leaving the door open to say, to explain that you're asking for this help, but you understand that it might be uncomfortable for them, or it might be, especially right now with a lot of the protests and things like that going on, there are, particularly with Black people, there's a lot of discomfort around having these conversations. It's painful. And so leaving that kind of open to say, if you are able, if you are willing, if you are in a good space to help me right now, I would appreciate it, rather than just sort of thinking that, because you're doing this thing, they should be appreciative and they should jump at the chance to help you. Being respectful of their time and their emotional state and things like that. So yeah, those are, I think, 3 good ways to avoid tokenizing is leading with asking for help rather than granting them something, identifying their value outside of the fact that they're an underrepresented group, and really giving them the option, setting it up for them to say no thank you, and making them feel comfortable in declining that opportunity right now. I think those are 3 really strong places to start.
Awesome. We received another question from an audience member that asked, do you have any examples of events that you think are doing diversity well?
Let's think. Honestly, I'm sure that there are. None of them are exactly coming to mind right now, because I can't really think, bring a lineup to mind. I would like to say WPCampus. Let me look at the lineup for it, and it is difficult because, in my opinion, there is no such thing as a perfectly diverse speaker lineup. it's one of those very human things that we strive for perfection and we'll probably never reach it, but we're going to get close. So the closer you can get, the better. And it's also very personal. So like I might look at a speaker lineup and think, oh, I see quite a few people that look like me, and it feels good. It feels like this is a diverse lineup, but there might be somebody from a different underrepresented group who might look at that lineup and say, no, there's nobody who looks like me. And so it really, what I would recommend, because I can't really answer that, what I would recommend instead is for you to really start looking at the speaker lineups. Every time you see on your timeline or in your inbox, information about a new event, virtual event that's coming up, really go and look at the speaker lineup and see how many different types of people there are. And that's not just men and women, but how many skin tones you see. If you see age variation, if you see people who disabilities are not always visible. There are a lot of invisible disabilities and invisible illnesses, but see if you see any people who might have a disability. As many different people as you can find, maybe the people from different countries, language speakers, so on and so forth. Start looking for that. And I think that the more you look at different speaker lineups, you will sort of learn what is and is not a diverse speaker lineup, if that makes sense. Again, it's a very objective question. There is actually a Twitter account that identifies, like they give ratings to events based on how diverse their speaker lineups are. I don't remember what they're called right now, but after I get off of this live stream, I will definitely go and find that and I will share them. So if you go to my Twitter in probably about 30 minutes, I'll share that, and that might be a good resource for you.
Keeping a watch on the questions to see if other questions pop in. We have just one comment or feedback that was provided to the questions area. It says, thank you, Allie. Thank you so much for being willing to educate folks. I know it's exhausting. Less than 3.
Thank you. Thank you for attending and listening and being receptive. It is a little bit exhausting, but I find that within the WordPress community, especially, people are always extremely open to hearing these things. And it like makes me feel good to have these kind of conversations and to feel like I'm having some sort of, even if it's a small impact, some sort of impact with people. So I'm glad that you're here and I'm glad that you're listening.
Allie, sorry, my dogs wanted to show up.
Okay.
I have another question. I have another question from an attendee who asks, can you elaborate on attending events aimed at our own identities? As a majoritized person, how am I not intruding?
It's a good question. It depends on the event. I think there are some events that are, maybe specifically, built around that group of individuals. A good example would be WordSesh Americas, which was, I believe, last month or maybe the month before. And it just so happened that it was almost entirely a male speaker lineup, or female. And I remember seeing that and sort of thinking, like, I wonder how many men might see that and think, oh, well, this isn't for me, for whatever reason. So it depends on, what the event is particularly for or about. But I can almost guarantee you that in almost all cases, you will not be intruding. If you're treated that way when you attend, something is wrong there. Especially now with virtual events. I mean, nobody is going to really see you anyway, so it really might not even come up. But it's an event that is particularly, we're talking about, we're an all women's WordCamp or something like that, and they are excluding men from attending. That seems like an issue. That seems kind of like a problem. It's tricky. You have to look at, why is this event taking place? Why is this event being hosted in the first place? There are certain things, like there is a women, WordPress women in color Slack group. And yeah, that is really just for WordPress women of color. And it's meant to be a safe place, that group. And so, yeah, that might not be a place for you because it was created for the purpose of just these types of people. However, something like an event that is so much bigger and wider, I can't imagine that you would be like turned away or made to feel bad for attending. And if you are, I would look at, why was this event founded? And that in itself would probably teach you something about that group and that environment. So I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry if it doesn't. I've never experienced that where, I've been at an event that was specifically for one thing and somebody else showed up and that person was like shunned or turned away. But yeah, to that question, I'm sorry. But if that ever happens, tweet me, let me know. I'd love to figure out why and talk about it with you.
Thank you, Allie. We had another question that had pretty much mirrored the same question about participating or being in diverse spaces where you are not the majority or the targeted group. I believe the other question also pretty much touched on that same point, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think also what I would kind of offer for that kind of thought process of like maybe being uncomfortable being the only person who maybe looks like you in that environment is just consider the fact that that is how many underrepresented people feel all of the time. That they are the only person in their environment who looks like them. Last job, I absolutely loved working there. I think it's a fantastic company. I was the only person of color that worked there for almost a year. It is sometimes you don't feel like you belong, but if it's a good environment, if it's a healthy environment overall, those people will welcome you. And if you walk into it with an attitude of I'm here to learn, I'm here to be a sponge and to learn, what I can and to try to help, use my privilege for good, then it should all end up okay, hopefully.
Allie, I have another question from an audience member who asks, how does the move to primarily virtual events as part of coronavirus impact diversity?
It's a really good question. I think it's kind of a double-edged sword because when everything is virtual, we don't see each other as much in both kind of ways of meaning. Like we don't see each other. Like you're not going to be able to go to a word camp, stand outside during lunch and see how diverse or not diverse that group of people is. And that kind of sucks because you're really only looking at the person who is presenting and that's it. But at the same time, I feel like, and I don't have any data to support this. I don't know any data like this has been made available or will be made available. But when all of our events are virtual, it means that people from every single corner of the earth with an internet connection can attend. And I like to think that that aids in diversity because given that, statistically speaking, rather, people of color are more likely to come from a low income area where they will have less access to the ability to travel to events, the ability to afford events, the ability to take time off work to go to events or time away from their families to go to events. Hopefully this means that with more virtual events, those sorts of people can more easily tune in to events like these. And that is fantastic. Like lowering the barrier for entry to these events, making them virtual can do a lot for diversity. But that has to be intentional. It doesn't always just happen by itself. It has to happen through the event organizers really making sure that those sorts of people are aware that these events are taking place. So I think that there are two possibilities, right? Of either the event becoming more enclosed and less diverse because it's just circulating through Twitter and email newsletters, and the same people are getting information. It's not being, posted up on college campus billboards and things like that. But at the same time, with virtual events, that barrier is lowered and more types of people can attend. People who maybe couldn't travel before because they have a disability can attend these events now. And I think that what I would love to see is a way for, I feel like it would have to be like within the WordPress community, because even though there are lots of virtual events going on, I don't know how we would combine all that data, but it would be fantastic if all of the WordPress hosted events could in some way try to pool their data and figure out if, if WordCamp Denver from this year was more diverse than WordCamp Denver was from last year, just as an example. I don't know how that would happen. It'd be really cool if it did, though, so that we could actually see that. But yeah, it's a double-edged sword, and I think that it has pros and cons as far as diversity is concerned.
Allie, following up to that question, do you have any recommendations on how best to push outreach to those diverse communities of practice that you would want to sort of incorporate to invite and participate within a virtual conference or an virtual, primarily virtual event or project?
Absolutely. It definitely starts with research. So having somebody or more than one person on the team sitting down and just Googling for a while to say, okay, if this is a React conference, are there any, women React developer Facebook groups, Slack groups, Twitter lists, finding those kind of movements, finding those groups, finding those organizations, and just making a list, getting a spreadsheet together, making a list of as many of them as you can, and emailing them, DMing them, sending out as many messages as you can to say, hey, this is going on. And you don't even have to say, hey, we're trying to make the event more diverse. Just to say, hey, this is a React conference. Your organization is focused on React. We would love to have you share the, attendee page or sign up page, call for speakers, whatever the case may be. Really just literally outreaching, doing that outreach to those people based on what their interests are, but starting the very beginning of the process with, okay, we're looking at underrepresented groups who are interested. So like if you have a React group, reaching out to a Facebook group of women business owners, it's probably a weak move, because how many of those people are going to be into React? Probably not very many. Just because they're women doesn't mean it's a good opportunity. But getting specific about the topic is where that's going to be at. So example, there's a fantastic podcast, which I guest host sometimes, called Women in WP. If you are a WordCamp or a WordPress focused event, reaching out to that podcast and saying, hey, could you give us a shout out? Or hey, could you share our call for speakers on your Twitter? That would be a really great connection to have. And again, you don't even have to reach out and say, we want more women, you're a women pod. Like, you don't have to be that obvious about it and potentially tokenize that person. But just reaching out to them, or like any other React group, like for my previous example, it starts with sitting down, doing the research, making a list of people to reach out to, and reaching out to them on the strongest basis of interest that you can. So reaching out for what it is they actually are interested in, are passionate about, enjoy, and, giving them the details and information, because for people in their group to apply to speak at your event or to come to your event benefits them, right? So you're not really asking that much from them. You're just bridging that gap. So that is how I would recommend going about doing that for sure.
Great. Thank you, Allie. Audience member that asks, how do you speak up against something like a microaggression in an environment where you're one of the very few visible minorities? The risk involved being reprisal from certain people for, quote, calling them out, unquote, especially when there is very little plausible deniability.
That is very difficult, and I've had to encounter that than once. And it depends on your environment, which is unfortunate. You can very easily kind of handle that the wrong way depending on the people that you're dealing with. Anecdote, I once was working somewhere where I experienced a microaggression, and I reached out to the person who performed that microaggression in private Slack DM because from my perspective, it was like, I don't want to call them out in front of everybody and make it seem like I'm being like, hey, that was blah, blah, blah. So I just reached out to them and I said, hey, I know that this was not your intention. I know that you're not like, you didn't do this on purpose, but this is, I literally kind of like did a mini history lesson for them of like why what they did or said was not okay for me. And I just sort of said, this is how I'm feeling. This is why this isn't okay. Please don't do that again. And I just tried to make it as unconfrontational as possible, as non-accusatory as possible, to just literally have a conversation and explain to them why I didn't appreciate what they did. I was later told that I should have gone to our superior with that issue. I kind of saw it as something that was small enough to be handled between the two of us because I felt like I knew that person well enough to have that conversation. But I was later told that I should have gone to our supervisor to relay that directly to them. I would say if this is an issue of like your workplace, I might even right now go to your supervisor or your boss and say, hey, if I experience a microaggression, and kind of get ahead of the problem. Kind of wish that I had done that at the beginning, because if you are working in an environment that supports you, which I hope that you are, there should be a conversation and there should be a system in place for dealing with that kind of an incident. Because while a microaggression does not a racist make or a sexist or, whatever the issue is, it is a symptom of systemic racism or systemic sexism or whatever the case may be. And so it needs to be dealt with in the same manner. So yeah, I would have a conversation with your employer about how they would like those sorts of things to be handled. If the way that they prefer to handle it is not acceptable to you, that is a much bigger conversation that needs to be had, starting with yourself. Like if I worked somewhere where a microaggression was completely dismissed by my employer, that's not somewhere that I would like to be. So it starts with having a conversation with the person in charge, essentially, because if I had reached out to that person directly about that microaggression and that turned into like a conflict, it makes sense that I should have involved a third party sort of mediator. So yeah, I think it starts with really understanding the culture and the values of where it is that you are and moving forward from there. On a more micro level, when approaching somebody about a microaggression, it's really important to explain to them, because microaggressions by definition are unconscious, if that makes sense. Like, people typically are not reaching out to hurt you. They're saying or doing something that they believe is fine or believe is okay, and it isn't. So educating them on why it's not okay, asking them not to do it again, and if you feel comfortable and able, leaving that open for conversation for them to ask you questions and really clarify so that they understand the root of why that wasn't okay. So that may have gone on longer than it needed to. But I hope that answers your question. And that is a really, really good question. And I think it could bear even more conversation. So DM me about that. I'd be happy to further answer any questions that you have about that. Because I think we're running, are we running short on time? How are we doing on time?
Allie, you are right at time. So as of this time, it is 45 minutes after the hour. So you hit it perfectly. Allie, I'd just like to thank you for your presentation. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.